Hello friends, myself Professor Vinod Pillai. Welcome to C++ programming session. In today's session, I'm going to teach you about namespace. Namespace is a new feature being introduced into the object-oriented programming that is in C++. We'll understand what's the need of namespace, how we can declare variables, methods, and classes inside the namespace, how we can extend a namespace, and is it possible to create a namespace inside a namespace or not. Okay, I've further divided into my mind so that we can understand more properly. That's further being division. That's a namespace. We'll see what's the need of namespace, how to declare variables, methods, how to write methods logic outside the namespace, how to declare class inside the namespace, how to declare methods class methods outside the namespace, how to create an object of a namespace, extending namespace, and how to use them in header files and all those things. Let's get into that. Let's first understand what exactly is a namespace and what is the need of namespace. Okay, let's go into simple programming. I've created a simple C++ program without any namespace concepts. I've simply added my header file using namespace std. I'll explain this why I have written it. Integer main, simple hello world, that is welcome users, and return 0. Okay, let's try whether it's running or not. I just compile it and I get welcome users. So basically without namespace it's working fine. So what is the need of namespace? I'm not talking about this particular namespace, I'm talking about creating our own namespace. Using namespace std, basically we are doing is we are using inbuilt namespace. I'm talking about today is how to create our own namespace and what is the need of namespace. Okay, let's see a simple example as a problem. We have a global variable called integer val, and suppose it's having a variable as a value as 100, and I want to have a same variable name val inside my method. It is quite possible. I create val again, but I'm given a value as 200 inside it. Now try to print the value is, I'm saying like this way something. Okay, I save it. Let's try to compile it. What I'm getting, program is compiled. Okay, I'm getting a value as 200. Okay, how is this possible? And what has happened is basically is that I can create two variables of same name. This is possible because one is in the global namespace, another is in the local space, local variable of the method main. So it is quite possible. I can't create one more variable here as well as 500 because they will be in the same scope. Okay, if I try to compile this, I'll get an error. Okay, redeclaration of val. Okay, so this is not possible. Why? The previous one was possible because it's a global one. So val will act as a global and val this one will act as a local. So I can have at a time only one variable as a local and global. Is it possible for me to here to access this thing, the global one? It is quite possible with the help of scope resolution operator. This is somehow solved in C++. This is one of the problems which we used to face in C. Okay, so where is the namespace all about? Now namespace is something which is the disadvantage in, or you can say the problem we were telling, that I can't create another variable here of val. I'll show you. I'm trying to create two variables of same name in the global, but it will not allow me to do that. But if there is such a requirement is there, not even variables or method, that to have two different variables or methods in the same namespace or in the same scope, then it is not possible without the help of namespace. So what is all about namespace? Namespace allow us to create a area or a block of structure where we can have the variables, methods, and classes. And in the same program, that means in a single notepad file, we can have multiple variables having same name but being put into separate namespace, or you can say separate blocks. We are physically creating, I mean, a logical space is being created between the variables and methods, so they don't interact with each other and they will not disturb or they will not create any error that you are having the same name what I am having. Okay, let's try to have it. First thing, for the syntax wise, you require to declare a namespace, name, a word called namespace. Okay, then the namespace, I'm putting my name only in the namespace, Vinod. Okay, and I'm redeclaring the variable val as 500. Okay, let's try to compile it. Now if you see, it's been compiled. So you'll say, okay, fine, you have created, with the help of namespace you can create a variable in that particular area. Now comes the question, how you'll access it. To access any variable, you can access the variable inside the namespace with the help of the name of the namespace. That is, my namespace name is Vinod. To access val, I have to use Vinod scope resolution variable name. Okay, let's see that it has been compiled. Let's try to run it, and you see now the value is coming 500. That is, it is accessing the variable which is there in the namespace. Okay, so that is one of the advantage you can get. That means what we are creating basically a block where we can have our own variables of same name in the same scope, or it is very advantageous when we are purchasing some header files or some library from third party, because it is a quite possibility that we have created some class and he is also having the same name of the class, so it will create any problems in our programs. So with the help of namespace we'll able to solve it. So this is the way we can declare the variables inside the namespace, and this is the way how we can access the variables. For the time being, let's see how to create methods. Simply write void display welcome message from namespace. Okay, so to access it, again use the concept of Vinode scope resolution display space, compiled it and run it. So you can see I can access the methods inside the namespace. Even I can have my own method void display here, the same way as I have explained you the variables. See out, let's copy it only simply. Okay, message from, I'll change it into a global method. Okay, so to call it, I just simply need to call with the help of compile. Saved it, let's compile it, let's run it. Now you can see I'm accessing a variable val from the namespace, I'm accessing the method from the namespace, and finally I'm accessing the method of my global method that is also having the same name as the what is there in the namespace. So it is quite possible to have methods inside the namespace. It is also possible that to have a method declaration inside the namespace but definition outside the namespace. Okay, let's try to call that method. I'll explain you what I have written. Let's first, I'll show you what is the output, whether it is running or not. Let's see it. It is been compiled and it's able to run it. Now what I've done is basically is that I have declared my method inside the namespace only, but the definition is been not specified inside the namespace. In that case, if you want to define the methods logic outside the namespace, it is still possible, but there is a rule. Always comes first is the return type of the method, then comes the name of the namespace, scope resolution, then comes the method name. Okay, so my method name is set, my namespace is Vinod, and my return type is void. So it says something like this: void Vinod scope resolution set. Okay, so we have seen how we can have a method logic outside the namespace also. So basically we have covered what is the need of namespace, what are the advantages. We have seen that we can have multiple variables, same name, method same name, but in the same scope also we can access it and we can able to run the program. That is possible with the help of namespace. how we can have variables inside the namespace, how we can have methods inside namespace, and it is possible that methods logic outside the namespace is also possible, but just the declaration is inside the namespace. That is possible. How we can declare then classes inside the namespace? Let's see that. Now again I go into the program. For the timing I just remove these methods, I don't need these ones, so I just remove these ones from here. I don't need this also, I just removed it. I don't need the global, I just want to explain you the class one. We'll concentrate only on the class. Okay, and for the timing we'll just remove all these ones, so it will be quite easy for us to understand what exactly I want to say. Okay, so class, here comes a class. Suppose I have a student class. For the timing I'm not keeping any variables. Void set is the method, or suppose it is having a method as set. I don't have to have some variables. Cout set method of student class, void display. I'm talking about a display method of student class. This is simply nothing special in this. I've simply done is I've created a class with set and display. Method of student class. Okay, so nothing much. If you know some basic concepts of C++, you will understand this. I have just simply created a student class without any variables, just to show you for the time being that I have a set method whose logic is inside the class, and it is having a display method whose logic is outside the class. Let's try to create the object of the student class. Now creating an object of student class is something like this. Let's first try to run this and check it up whether it's able to run or not, and then I'll explain you what is all about. It's been saved. Let's try to compile it. It's been compiled, that's good. And I'm getting a message set method from the student class and display method from student class. Let's see what is happening. Okay, what basically I've done is simply I've created a class. I'm having a set and display method. Set method's logic is inside the class and display's method is outside the class. It is following the same rules and regulation what a class and object concept says. Okay, now comes as such the class is inside the namespace, so I can't simply write student obj. It will not find it because student is inside my particular block of a namespace. To access that particular block I have to write the namespace name, scope resolution, and the class name. This is the same rule how I access the variables. Okay, so student is my class. I'm creating an object. Once the object is being created, then you don't require to refer to the namespace name. Okay, so from there onwards I have not written Vinod scope resolution object or something like that. So I'm now simply saying obj dot set method. That is important. Now this is also quite possible. Students sometimes ask, is it possible to write the method logic outside the namespace? Yes, it is possible. That the way we used to have the method logic outside the namespace for the normal methods, it is possible for the same for the class methods. Only thing is void is the return type, then comes the class name, scope resolution, student, scope resolution, display. Okay, now I just simply change it outside the namespace. Okay, let's see what's happening. Okay, if you want I'll explain once again what I've done for the display right now. Okay, it's been compiled. Okay, and it's running, and if you see the message, that's display method from student class outside the namespace. What I've done is here is that display is declared inside the class is inside my namespace Vinod. That is true, but I'm not defining the method inside the class, not even outside the class. I want to define the methods logic outside the namespace also. It is possible Only thing is you have to remember always comes the first the return type, then comes the namespace name, scope resolution, then comes the class name, then scope resolution, then comes the method name. Nothing else. Other all things, the logic is all your part. Okay, so we have seen again two more concepts: how to create class inside namespace, how to create, how to have methods logic outside the namespace, and how to create objects of the namespace. Okay, now there is another concept called extending the namespace. Okay, there is no such special thing about extending the namespace, but it is possible to have, yes, it is true that I can create multiple namespace in one program or in a one file itself. Okay, but it is also possible that I can create another namespace with the same namespace name what I have created previously. I'm having already a namespace name Vinod. I can recreate the namespace name Vinod. So if I want to have it, Vinod val2 is equal to 700. Okay, let's try to access it, whether it's able to access it or not. See out, the result is Vinod, scope resolution val2. Okay, let's see what's happening. Compiled it. I'm able to run. Let's able to run it. Okay, so the old namespace is also working, the new namespace is also working. What, so basically what has happened, nothing has happened much. It has got a very good feature. It is quite possible that you have created a namespace at the top of your program, then you have your normal logic, and suddenly you felt that you want some other variables to be kept inside the namespace which you have created at the top of your program. So it is not necessary that you to go up again at the top of the program, again write the variables or method inside that namespace. It is quite possible that it is has a feature that you can write the namespace, or you can rewrite that same namespace at the location wherever you are having those variables. Okay, the simply the program will compile. When it is being compiled, this all namespace will be kept into one single block. So basically if you have created three different blocks of same name, at the end of the program it will automatically will consider these three blocks into one block because they are having the same name. So that's one of the good advantages we are having. Okay, so it is possible to have multiple namespaces with same name in a single program. Okay, how to use the namespace in header files. Okay, this is quite a different concept. Okay, that generally people used to have, that how we can possible to use, or you can say the real power of namespace stays in that only. Okay, that is when you purchase the library, this is the problem we are facing, that the library the person we have written, he will be providing us the header files. So this problem, or you can say we don't have to create the uh, namespace there, but header files it is already there. But to show you, I will create a header file and I'll show you how we can access it and how it can do those things and all. Okay, let's get into the program. Okay, so for this I need some two header files and I'll show you how we can access it. Okay, I'll create one more header file, or you can say one simple program, stream using namespace std. So I'm shifting my complete namespace over here. Okay, so this must be the scenario. Okay, so basically what I'm saying is I have a different file. Let me save it so you'll be able to understand more properly. Copying in the same file plus program. Okay, okay, we know dot cpp. Okay, so what I've done is like using namespace std, I'm creating a namespace in this file. It is not having any main methods, it's having a simple namespace with a method called display. Okay, I'm having another file called main cpp. In that I want to use that namespace. So this will be the scenario. This is a namespace I have purchased, or a library I have purchased from a third party. He is having some method. He has kept, luckily he has kept that method in the namespace. When I purchase that particular library, I'll include that library, and to use that method I'll simply write my the namespace which he has created, scope resolution, and the method name. Okay, let's try to compile it, whether what's happening. Let's see it. And you will see the welcome message from the namespace. So if you see carefully, I'm not having any display method in the main method, but it is basically trying to call the method from my header file vinod.cpp, which is having a namespace called vinod, and it is accessing that display method. Okay, so in this way we can access the namespaces, or you can say this way you can create your own namespaces whenever you are creating libraries or header files. It is always advisable to create your own namespace and then you create the methods, instead of creating simply methods and classes in the header files. Okay, so we have seen that topic also. Okay, yes, it is quite possible to create namespace inside a namespace. Okay, so let's see that also. I'll simply create this namespace test. So I'm having a display method inside the test namespace, and I'm having a test method which is inside the namespace, which is inside the vinode namespace. Okay, so how will I access it? I'll say vinode scope resolution test scope resolution display. Let's try to run this one. It's compiled and it's running. So it is quite possible to create one namespace inside another namespace, and that's called nesting of namespace. So we have seen nesting of namespace. We have seen how to use namespace with the help of header files also, or when header files is created, what are the things you should be consider. Okay, it is quite possible to have unnamed namespace. It is not that important. I don't consider it as one of the good things, but features or something, but I feel so as it is there. So you should be able to know it is something like a global concept. So to access it, you don't have to write something, you have to simply access that rel. Okay, I just want to show you that it is possible that to have some namespace without any name, and that's called unnamed namespace. Let's try to compile it. It's been compiled and I try to run it, and I'm getting the result as 300. This variable is coming from that namespace which is not having any name, so I call it as unnamed namespace. Okay, yes, one important thing I have not taught you till now, that is I can access the namespace in two different ways. Basically accessing the namespace with the help of namespace name, scope resolution, namespace name, and the method name. Okay, yes, it is possible that you can write, suppose I'm having, for timing I just remove this one, it will be easy to understand. So I'm having a namespace which is having a display method. Okay, so that to access it I am writing vinode scope resolution display. Yes, this is quite possible, but if suppose assume that vinode is having multiple methods, so again and again writing vinode scope resolution display, vinode scope resolution display, there is a much better option you can do. You can make that namespace as a global namespace for this particular program. So I'm writing using namespace vinode. So basically whatever variables, methods, or classes which I have written in that particular namespace will become a global namespace or a global variables, methods, and classes for this particular program. I'll recommend avoid this unless and until you're very sure you want to do it, because in this case what happens is the methods will become global. So if you have same method names and all, it will still now start clashing even though you are having namespace concepts, because you have made that namespace as a global. Okay, just compile it. Okay, oh yes, I have removed the rel from there, so it's giving me an error. So I compiled it. so I still get the message without any Vinod scope resolution. Previously I've written, now I don't have to write that because I made the Vinod namespace as a global namespace for this particular program. You should avoid this unless until you are very sure that you want to use this one, then only you use it. Yes, it is quite possible that we can have a namespace naming conventions. It is mainly used for if you are having inner namespace, so it is quite difficult to always refer Windows scope resolution, test scope resolution, display. We can give a alias name, something like this. Okay, namespace, and you give a short name win, okay, equal to the namespace name, scope resolution, test scope resolution, as many inner namespace you want to refer you can have. Right now I'm having only the one namespace only, so I can now refer win scope resolution display. Okay, so it is ultimately I'm making a shorter name for my inner namespaces, so that I don't have to refer the namespace with the outer namespace, scope resolution, inner namespace, and that way. Okay, let's try to compile it and we'll see whether it is possible or not. It has not shown any error and it is giving me the message. So even though I have not created any namespace Vinod, I have created an alias name for Vinod namespace as a namespace name as Win. So I can access now Vinod with the help of Win scope resolution display. I hope so I have covered most of the topics. Okay, but let's see once again. I've shown you how to what is the need of namespace, why we need the namespace, and advantages we are getting in namespace, how we can declare variables inside the namespace, how we can have methods inside the namespace, logic outside the namespace, class inside the namespace, class methods, logic outside the namespace, creating objects of a class which is being created inside the namespace, how we can extend the namespace, what is the use of namespace in header files and all, how it is a good to, or whether why we should use it also, what is the concept of unnamed namespace, how we can, whether we can have it and namespace inside of namespace also, we have seen that also, and what is the concept called namespace aliases. Okay, these are the major advantages we get once we are using the namespace. I hope I have shown you most of the features what is available in C++ namespace. If you still have any queries or any doubts or further confusions or something, please email me at my email address vinodthebest@gmail.com, or else you can post your comments. Okay, I'll try to explain it once again. Okay, thank you and have a nice day.